Greenland dialogue. That was where we were thinking that the first time, many years ago now, and I thought that with your sort of very wise approach, I always appreciated your advice a lot, so it's very good to know that you are so centrally placed also here in Cancun in the Mexican delegation to try to take care that we can keep momentum in the international and climate negotiations because the world needs this. To the question of the media, it's a huge discussion and it's my favorite topic, so I'll try to be very, very brief because I think that it's also the dialogue with you that is important here. I think when Fernando Tudela mentions this framing is very important, that's true. In a sense, that was what we all succeeded very well in doing in the run-up to Copenhagen. Actually, we succeeded in framing the issue. I remember the second Greenland dialogue in 2006. All the environment ministers said, oh, if only our finance ministers and our heads of states could sort of get interested in climate change, then we could get things moving. And actually from 2006 over Bali in 2007 and the run-up to Copenhagen, actually we managed to mobilize people. We, the whole sort of climate community, those who have been dealing with this for many years, NGOs, business people, politicians, negotiators, and so on and so forth. The problem then is we make the message come across how urgent it is to address climate change, what the impacts are, why we have to deal with this, all these kind of things that were there. But then I think that we run, well, then of course if we had gotten the big deal done, then it would have been another thing. But when that is not the case, then we run into one thing, which is characterizing media. When they have had a topic on the agenda for a certain number of times, then no matter how important it is, then it's old news. And it's very, very difficult then to reframe it. And that, of course, we can regret. I remember, as Fernando referred to being a TV journalist, and that was not in a very superficial program, that was in a program where we had plenty of time. But even then, it should be a very dull Friday when all the other topics had fallen apart before we would go to climate change. Because can you imagine if you are asked, you're a TV journalist, you are asked to make a 60 seconds presentation of what is climate change about? It is simply just very, very difficult. So there I think, one thing is we can regret media tendency of being superficial, what is old news, what is essential, all these kind of things. But I think that their politicians, negotiators should also reconsider the language we use, how we communicate this. It's not just because it's always easy for politicians to say, oh, it's the press, they do not understand it. But it's also the way we talk about this. There are too many acronyms, there are too many abbreviations. Who on earth would know what LULUCF is? Who on earth would know what REDD+ is? As I heard the Norwegian minister, he once said, I refuse to use this word REDD+, I just talk about tropical forest, and I know that it's not all of it tropical forest, but it doesn't matter because I have to communicate things. And I think that we have to make sort of reinvent the narrative so that we say, yes, it's still about science, it's still about the 2 degrees, it's still about the 450 ppm and all these kind of things. But it's also about getting access to energy in Africa. It's also about the family in India who, if they do not have a sustainable way of living where the women will have to walk miles and miles in order to get water or wood for cooking or whatever it is. I mean, we must also make these more tangible examples. What is it we are talking about? Yes, there is a certain percentage of the population who can understand that this is going to be very important in 2030 and 2050 and what have we, but it's here and now. So it must also be a narrative around climate change, energy, sustainable growth, and by that also jobs, and a fairer distribution of things and goods in a world where when my children will be my age, we will be 9 billion people on planet Earth. So I think media could be much better. We could come down to some of the details in this. But I also think that those of us dealing with these things will have to be much better at trying to communicate this very, very complex issue. We cannot expect people to understand what it's all about if every time we get 30 seconds in a TV spot, we think that we are going to communicate what it's all about. We must sort of choose our messages, and we must be better at making it tangible to people. Why is that important? Because if we don't, then we cannot expect the interest to continue to be there. There are crises, there are many other issues that is very important in many countries, and to keep this agenda, this issue high on the agenda, that really requires a certain communication effort from us, and also try to educate the press a bit. You cannot expect a journalist just coming into the room and understand what LULUCF is all about. So there, I think, instead of just blaming the press, we should also reconsider how we communicate this.
You study